All right, so it looks like we are up and running. Welcome. I'm going to go ahead and make sure I can share my screen. Becky, Jazz, panelists, can you see my screen okay? You'll be my testers here.
Yeah.
Awesome. We're not going to have the
Yep.
screen the whole time just to welcome people so they know, hey, I'm in the place where I thought I should be. So thank you so much for joining us for the Brave New World, Artificial Intelligence and Coaching, Talent Development, and maybe from my perspective, because I'm a human, human connection. So we're going to be speaking with several experts from coaching, from talent acquisition and development, and tech to really have some insightful discussions about AI and what does it mean for us. And as we were getting ready, CT, one of our panelists, and I were just saying, hey, we don't have all the answers. It's so emergent. And we're not promising answers today, but we are promising you a really interesting discussion and something where you can engage and have some good, thought-provoking things that will keep us going towards what's next. So today, I'm your host. My name's Alexa Beavers, and I just want to highlight that our session today is sponsored by ICF Virginia, who has sponsoring a number of sessions of the thousands that are out there for International Coaching Week. So if you get a chance, just take a little screenshot of this QR code, and you can go out there and see what else is out there. We'd love to see you throughout the week, this International Coaching Week, where we're really celebrating coaching and what it can do for individuals, teams, organizations, and society. So thanks for being with us. Our agenda today. So first, we're going to introduce you to our fabulous panelists. Then we'll go through some questions. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit, talk to our panelists about how is AI showing up for each of you in the industries where you live and work and play. We'll talk a little bit about the practical integration of AI into our work. We'll talk about human connection and how is AI really reshaping that, and what's important about human connection in coaching and in industry when it's working alongside AI. We'll touch on ethics and the risks that come about as a result of having this new technology, but also the benefits, and really open a little bit of a discussion about what does this crew think are some of the skills that will support us into the future. We're going to save the last 15 minutes for Q&A. But what that doesn't mean is that you have to hold your questions until then. I invite you to put them in the chat where our producers, Shannon Cornelison and Kelsey Arico, are standing by so that they can see what's coming in. Now, we're going to practice what we preach a little bit. We're going to have AI help us because we are looking for themes in your questions. So if we get a lot of questions, we're going to put them into AI and say, tell us what the themes are so we can pose a question that will hopefully enable a conversation that will get at those multiple questions. So we'll be practicing what we preach today, and we will ask you to put your questions in as they come to your mind, and then we will address them during the last 15 minutes. So that's kind of how we're going to roll today. I'm excited to introduce you to our panelists. So welcome to our panelist, Becky Chung, who is the Vice President of Talent Development at Cielo Talent. Becky is a seasoned organizational and talent development leader. She's currently Vice President of Development at Cielo Talent, and her passion, excuse me one second, lies in developing total blunder here. Her passion lies in aligning business objectives with employee growth, and she's doing that to foster both organizational success and individual fulfillment. I see that so much in how I speak with her. She has a strong background in organizational development and has implemented many strategies that enhance workplace culture and performance. In her organization, there's a commitment to individuals and environments where both businesses and employees can thrive. And that's how they're using AI today. We're going to hear more about it in just a few minutes. Let's hear a little bit about CT Leong. So CT, we're so happy to have you here. CT is an economist turned entrepreneur and has been building companies serving enterprise and education for the past decade. He specializes in B2B software as a service analytics and practical applications of artificial intelligence. So over the past 15 years, CT has had the privilege of working with leaders spanning education, technology, financial services, telecom, healthcare, and more He's an alum of Cambridge in the UK and Columbia in New York, has lived in Asia, the UK, and the USA. He's also a dad of 3. Thank you so much for being here with us, CT. And we have Jazz Rasool. Jazz is an executive coach and AI coaching pioneer. Jazz has been an executive coach, he said when he came in, for approaching a quarter century, and leads a 550 plus member AI coaching alliance. He co-authored the Alliance Standard for AI Use in Coaching and teaches at the Digital Coaching Institute. He's been a longtime innovator, and he built his first AI coaching platform in 2008, long before I even knew that AI was a thing. He's also worked in EU-funded projects advancing astronaut performance for NASA. So he's the author of Coaching 5.0 and serves on Tech UK Skills and Diversity Council. Jazz holds a Bachelor's of Science in Physics and a Master of Science in Computer Modeling. We also have 2 trusty behind-the-scenes folks, Kelsey Arico and Shannon Cornelison of the Axela group, who are helping us produce today. So I'm going to hide these slides so we can see real humans, and we will get into it. So thank you, panelists, for being here today. Welcome. Our very first question, we're going to just ask you to share a little bit about what you're seeing in the industry. So AI is reshaping industries, and coaching is no exception. How do you see AI's role in coaching, talent development, and organizational growth from where you sit? We're going to start with you, Becky. You're out there in the real world seeing it every day.
Definitely, we are seeing AI really influence the workplace. So a couple of ways I see this coming to light right now is improving the ability to coach others and help shape careers. So we see AI really being able to take some of that guesswork out that has always been so challenging for individuals to be able to use a system that can, go out to essentially large libraries of data and help you shape those conversations, allowing leaders to be able to focus on the more in-depth conversation rather than just trying to understand. So I see that being one really key way that AI is certainly going to help us improve that employee experience. I also see, as we look at things like career pathing and opening up people to figuring out what those new skills of the future are, AI is going to play such a great role in this. We've been able to start using that to allow for a more tailored experience for our talent and being able to give them recommendations. So like a Netflix experience for your own development of these things might interest you. This is what you should consider next as you're pursuing your career objectives. And from an organizational lens, I really see AI as being this growth accelerator. It is giving us so much more access to data, and we'll only continue to see that further. Especially when it comes to workforce planning, which we all know is a science no one's really getting right yet. I think AI will be able to start giving us more of that intelligence that we've been missing, to see how all of these skills transfer and where you have organizational gaps so that talent development functions can be a lot more informed and intentional in the programs that they're building and how they're future-proofing their organizations. So I think it's going to just really be such a meaningful tool in what comes over the next 10 years is probably enough to estimate right now, even 5 years.
That's a long outlook today when you think about how fast change is happening. So Becky, thank you so much. A couple of things that stood out to me, this personalization, not only for the individual employee, but that Netflix experience, but then for the leader to say, okay, how do I use AI to help me to be the best talent developer for this particular person? That's kind of a couple of things I picked on. And then all of that feeds into the success for the organization. And a lot of that is rooted into having access to data through AI. Yeah, really powerful. I'm curious, I'm going to ask the rest of you, Jazz and CT, to chime in, but anything you want to underline from Becky's comment right there? Thanks, Becky, before we jump into Jazz's initial response.
I think what you said about personalization is important, but there's a caveat, I think, a distinction to realize about that, which is personalization doesn't necessarily mean personal, because people can have a customized interface and everything. But the question is, are they going to feel this is something that's personal and relevant to them and has a resonance with them as well? So I've had some big discussions with people who design interface and said, oh, it's customized, it's bespoke, but the person doesn't have any kind of feeling of connection to it. They just see it as a tool. They don't see it really as something that they have a relationship with that's connected to who they are personally. So there's an important distinction between personalization and being personal.
I love that distinction. Being a coach is all about helping people to make distinctions. And that's why I think that part of what's really important is something that CT said is before we got on the call was, hey, this is about how do we become better humans during this process? Because being something that's personalized doesn't mean it is personal to us. CT, any comments before?
Yeah, just a really quick one. AI is so powerful, and it's only as powerful as what you feed it. And one of the things that I think, I'm sure we'll touch on this over the course of this call, is how do you strike that balance between feeding it just enough that it's useful, as opposed to feeding it too much that it starts taking over. So I'll just leave it at that for now.
Thanks, CT. Okay, so we have about 1 minute each for you and Jazz to comment on how is AI reshaping industries in your perspective. So Jazz, will you take it next? What are you noticing?
Well, I think the major thing to cover in a minute is the fact that we are in the midst of a new industrial revolution, and that's the fifth industrial revolution, which is all about humans and machines having their intelligence kind of play nicely with each other. But it's centered on human flourishing. It's the first industrial revolution to look after human beings and their empowerment rather than just advancing technology. So it's the first one where humans and technology need to kind of reciprocally develop one another. And if it's done right, we're going to see humans advance technologies, but technology will also advance our humanity. And if that's done right, we'll see humanity as a whole actually advance too. But I'll just finish by saying it does require coaching to handle stuff of change at the intersections of people ecosystems, technology ecosystems, but also the environment. Sustainability is a really important thing, and not just in a green way, but also sustainability of people's intentions, their attention, their motivation. If you don't exercise conservation around those things, then coaching doesn't tend to last.
I mean, I love that you put coaches kind of at the intersection, almost like helping people to find their way. CT, would you like to jump onto that and also add your perspective on how it's changing industries?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the focus on coaching and development is so critical, because as we move into a world where AI is more and more a part of our workflow, we have to keep questioning ourselves, right? What is that comparative advantage that humans have over the computing power that AI brings to the table? And it's interesting that even before OpenAI and ChatGPT became a thing, IBM, World Economic Forum, we were looking at the half-life of technical skills going down to as little as 2.5 years, meaning within 2.5 years, like half of the technical skills that we have become irrelevant and obsolete. I think that's going to be even more the case as AI grows in usage. And so what then do we have as human beings, as our skills? And what we sometimes disparagingly call soft skills, coaching, the ability to empathize with people, creativity, communication skills, like all of these start becoming more and more important and more critical to our organizations and to coaching and development.
CT, I think it's so interesting that on our panel, you are representing the tech industry and you're saying, hey, tech skills are becoming a little bit more obsolete. And there's something that we need to say about that in terms of side by side. What is the both and of being human and leveraging tech? So I think that's really Interesting that you're the one that said that. So thank you for opening it up that way. So Jazz, one of the things that you mentioned was, we're in industry, into the Industrial Revolution 5, the fifth Industrial Revolution. I'm getting it confused with Coaching 5.0. Sorry about that. And I want to hear from you with that piece in mind. Coaching has traditionally been rooted in human connection. How does AI play into that in the fifth industrial revolution rather than diminishing that human connection?
Well, it's something that I feel is rooted in the connection that we get through cultivating rapport. For me, a long time ago, I was running a rapport workshop for a big telecoms company here in the UK. And we were explaining to customer service agents that the first 3 steps were acknowledgement, appreciation, and affirmation. And if you couldn't at least acknowledge what was going on for a customer, or appreciate this situation, or provide some kind of affirmation that it was going to be worked with, you weren't going to develop the rest of the things required for effective and really deep kind of rapport and connection with the customer. And it goes both ways. The customers had to also acknowledge the company and what it could do and appreciate what we could do to help, those kind of things too. So rapport is probably the most significant demonstration of connection. And if AI can't do that, if it can't do basic things like acknowledge and appreciate and affirm what we're up to, it's certainly not going to be able to manage things like sympathy and empathy and deeper conscious connection. It tries with language-based sympathy and intellectual and cognitive ways of making it look like it's demonstrating sympathy and empathy. But these are things that don't involve feeling. And because they don't involve feeling, they don't involve lived experience, they don't involve our humanity. So it's a very digital form of relationship, not an organic one at all. So I think that if anybody wants to master the use of AI in coaching, they have to master its use in generating rapport and presence, basics. If it can't do things like that, how can it possibly be expected to help people transform themselves?
Yeah, I think it's so interesting because AI, as I've experienced it, and I'm not an expert, does tend to use words, language, as it's learned from, its algorithms that seem like it would be sympathy. And I think there can be a little bit of danger in substituting that for something that is truly feeling and has a lived experience. So really great point. Becky, I'm curious, with coaching being rooted in kind of human connection and being a great leader in human connection, how do you think AI plays into that in your industry?
I do think one of the ways AI can help is giving that emotional connection or helping you find that empathy by giving you more information to digest yourself. So it can be part of the data you use to build that rapport and relationship. I think you have to be cautious with that again, and really personalize that and understand that it's giving you data, not the actual experience, and bias and stereotypes can absolutely be built in that. But I do think it can help at times, especially when you're trying to work cross-culturally, giving you insights into what might be powering someone's approach, style, things like that, and start to break that down for yourself and understanding your own bias and how you're bringing that to a situation.
I like that you brought up biases. Not only that biases can be built into the tools themselves, so be cautious, but also that it can help you bust some of your own biases. Myth busting, it can give you more information to say, oh, there's more to the story than you have. Here, let me help you find it. So I think that's really powerful to bring other perspectives through data. Thanks, Becky. CT, what would you like to add?
I don't know. Is it okay for me to share a personal story? Like it's
You're among coaches, so I'll let you be the yes, please.
yeah. So recently I was going through a tough time, and one of the things that I was advised to do was seek out a therapist. And so I tried a few different options. One of the options was Headspace Coach, which is, you go on and you basically chat with a human coach, like in text, right? And so I tried that out. And I compared that experience with like just chatting with Claude, which is another one of the AI models, and it was worlds apart. Not in a good way for the human coach, because I felt I almost felt like I was talking with a human with Claude, whereas for the human coach, there was a really long lag time. I didn't feel like the questions were very probing, and I started getting curious about this, and so I looked into it, and just yesterday, this is Mental Health Awareness Month. One of the things that is the largest applications of AI today is in the mental health space, and it correlates with a lot of research that has been shown that when you pit the ability, like if you take away like the face-to-face interaction, you pit the ability of AI to demonstrate empathy, to show concern, and so on, in a synthetic way, as opposed to human beings. AI has started to surpass humans in being able to do that. And so that's really scary on one hand, but on the other hand, if we think about it from how do we use AI to enhance our humanness and humanity, exactly as what Becky was saying, right? Like being able to process large amounts of data for us, remind us of context. I don't know, like when I was an executive, I would get these huge PDF binders to go through on whether it was the Grow model or whatever it was, and I would not remember that before my coaching meeting with my staff, and I would just go in as myself, and I had bad skills as a coach, and so being able to prepare in a very succinct way, in a very contextual way, by bouncing some of these ideas off with AI, or helping it consolidate that information for me as a coach, and to be able to develop others, I think that just gives you superpowers.
Becky, do you want to chime in? We have a minute.
Yeah, I think that piece about using it to kind of become your superpower is so important, of just even thinking through how is my team going to react to something, and being able to ask someone before you get in the room and you're faced with those questions when you're leading through change, when you're working with a challenging stakeholder. I think all of those things don't take away the part of relationship building that you have to do as a person, but they do help you do it more effectively.
Yeah, and that's what your demonstration kind of played out. I think what was a surprise to me, and I'm curious how it plays into this next question, was your experience with the Headspace app versus the Claude. And you're like, well, Claude was faster, more responsive maybe, and you didn't have the same lag time as Headspace. As we start to leverage these tools, whether it's for independent coaches or as end users or as leaders leading others, what should we be aware of? Where can we start? And what should we be, thinking about in terms of evolving our techniques and tools? I'm going to start with UCT and then go to Becky and then Jazz.
Yeah, that's a great question, Alexa. I'm not sure I have a good answer for that, unfortunately. We're just chatting about this beforehand, like the way that, I don't know if you remember in school, like when you first started to be able to use a calculator in school, like your brain changed. You suddenly weren't as concerned about the mental math and getting it right, and you were more concerned about how do I structure these equations, how do I think about these problems differently. And I feel that in the age of AI, my brain is going through a similar rewiring. There are a lot of things that I just assumed either were not possible, or I assumed that they're just very hard to do. And a very quick 10-minute brainstorming session with ChatGPT or whoever it is, you just chuck in, hey, I've got this problem. Tell me how I should think about it, right? And just almost asking AI how to help you with your problem, and asking AI how to work with it. Like, how would you structure a prompt to support me in what I'm trying to do, right? So it's very meta, but at the same time, it's like thinking that way has unlocked so many things for me personally, and for the business as well. So I'm just putting it out there as this potential change in how we're thinking.
I really love that you're talking about, and thank you for taking it back to a calculator. I kind of think, I don't remember anyone's phone number anymore because my phone has.
Mhm.
But we are learning what to process and what to outsource now. So I think that's one example, and how it can speed you up to do something that you may not have been able to do very quickly or effectively. Becky, how about you? What do you think about, as we start using these AI tools, what's important?
I think it's important to define where you want to enhance your human experience or your relationship experience, and then what isn't adding value to that experience, and start to look at those tasks of what can move to AI, because it really should be centered around experience. This isn't meant to just activate technology for the sake of activating technology, but it's really about how do you enhance, how do you improve, how do you create more of, or new experiences that didn't exist before. So I think that's the piece where I would encourage people to get started is, well, where do I want to be investing my time? And then what do I need to move away from in order to do that? Or what's not really requiring that relationship?
In a way, it can help you create a path to a more fulfilling life, to be able to give you the time and space to be able to dedicate to the things that you're truly passionate about, where you can find ways to outsource it. So I think that's pretty cool. And it gives you a chance to have an outlet, and do the things you really love to do.
And simplify so many of the things that get in our way, and the decision fatigue I think many of us can experience with just everyday life. AI is a really great way to allow you to get rid of some of that.
Oh yeah, just reducing decision fatigue is high on the list. I love it. I love that practical tip. Okay, Jazz, I would love to hear from you. What are your thoughts on, as we start to integrate AI, what should we be thinking about? Where can we start?
I think you need to ask 3 questions. What is it okay to use AI for on its own? What requires some human oversight? And what are things that you should absolutely not be using AI for? And you really need to keep human in everything that you do. And that requires often an understanding of how much you're going to be engaging with people on sensitive issues. Especially things, for example, that are in the grey zone between coaching and therapy. If you go into that grey zone with AI, you're heading for trouble, because you could end up triggering trauma and destabilizing psychological safety. So those 3 questions are really important, and it's something I did a report on a little while ago, and it's interesting to discover that we all need support. We all need to be challenged. We all need reflection. And we need them in the right doses. But if we get them in the wrong doses or from the wrong sources, then we tend to get into trouble with our growth. And AI isn't perfect in those areas. I think it's really good at generating content and maybe even helping people with their competence. But when you get up higher up the ladder towards people's capability and capacity and consciousness, those human things, those higher common denominators of coaching, you really need to be leaving that territory to human beings.
So you kind of said there's 3 areas. There's a yes, use it, be careful zone, we're figuring it out, and then maybe a no-go zone. Can you re-summarize those for me?
Yeah, so it's like a traffic light scheme. There's a green area where it's all go. You can use AI, it's safe to use it, and you don't need to worry about any side effects as such. Then there's an area which is a bit more uncertain because it goes into ethically questionable areas, and maybe you need some human beings overseeing things. And then there's areas which are areas which AI doesn't have any affordances for, especially to do with things like emotion and feelings, and things that are to do with decision making, to do with things that affect human beings or society. Those are the territories that you kind of should really remain the sovereign territory of human beings. So yeah, those are the 3 territories. And you got a little traffic light scheme there that I created a chart for a little while ago, where just the AI stuff is green, the questionable stuff is kind of amber, and then the red area is you want to keep that human.
Awesome. No, this is fabulous because the next question we're going to get into are some of the ethical considerations. So maybe we could focus on the amber and the red, and you can talk to us a little bit about, okay, what are those areas of risk that we need to be highly aware of so we can make conscientious decisions to really leverage the green zone of AI?
Well, about 2 years ago, I think it was in June 2023, I did a presentation on the impact of the emerging EU AI Act, the law that was going to highlight how AI should be used in legal regulatory ways. And there were 4 levels of risk associated with that they highlighted as, there's low, there's medium and high, and then there's unacceptable levels of risk. And it kind of parallels that a little bit. I like to say, though, that AI is a bit like radioactivity in that when you first get a grip on it, it gives you a nice warm feeling. But if you're not wearing safety and protection, soon enough your hair is going to start falling out or you're going to pulling it out. So there are a lot of invisible harms, from that radiation. And it's the same thing with AI. There are a lot of invisible harms. And if you don't put safety and security first, then the innovation is not something you're going to be able to get any power or benefit from. So my suggestion usually is always take a safety and security approach first, and then you can have access to the innovation in a way that's ethical. Because you can have all the safety and security in the world, but if you're using innovation in ways that are unethical, you're going to end up making somebody else insecure and unsafe. So you've got to bring in ethics there that go beyond just transparency with your data. You've got to have good contracting in place. You've got to be clear about which AIs you're going to use, what you're going to use them for. And the most important thing is consent. Because too many times people give consent once and they think that it's okay to continue to use that consent for a whole host of other things that were never agreed to. So I published a paper recently on that, and it was the idea of live consent, living consent. It's not a one-off thing.
It's you can almost tap out at any time.
Yeah, you can refresh it anytime. And that way it protects you from an ethical perspective, but also protects psychological safety and its integrity.
That's super powerful. I think that, I'm taking notes over here, but, the safety and security is kind of like the entry point. Start there, and then you can tap into the innovation. And a couple of things I noted were, good contracting, high transparency, and then that continuous consent element that is needing to be in place.
Yeah.
CT, would you please expound on what your thoughts on the ethics of AI and how we should be navigating this new territory?
Absolutely. I mean, this is something that I'm doing on a daily basis where you have to take AI for a spin in a very contained environment and test it out, see its capabilities, see how it reacts to certain things before giving it a little bit more rein in what you're doing. And I'll give an example of this. Like recently, I was working on a logic problem from my daughter's math class. And it was about, you have 11 people in a cave. You're supposed to get them through a bunch of different tunnels. And what's the order in which you get them out of the cave? And so we're working it out together as humans. And I thought, just for kicks, let's chuck it into AI and see what solution they would come up with. And so we, as humans, we were trying to figure out, like, how do we get everyone out of the tunnels? We never specified that to the AI. So the solution that was given to us was to get me out. And everyone else would just die in the tunnels. And so logically, that was the right solution to the problem. But it was an unspoken humanness in us that just thought we had to get everyone out. And it just dawned on me, like, oh my gosh, okay, we need to be careful with this AI thing.
Don't follow blindly, right? That's what I'm hearing. Becky, what are your thoughts as you shepherd an organization into using AI?
I think, to Jazz's point, the transparency and taking that approach is so important because that's what's going to allow people to maintain that trust and have that effective relationship. And so if you do things that are eroding at that, you will lose that relationship, whether it's with someone you're coaching, your organization, even with your team. So I think that piece is really important to be mindful of, and how you use that to establish and maintain that trust, because that's what allows people to be innovative. You can't be innovative if you have too much fear. So I think that's a piece that I would really continue to have open dialogue about. How do we see this influencing work? How do we see things changing for the individual? What skills are going to be required for them in the future? And how are we trying to shepherd them as they move into this new industry or new experience that we're all going to be sharing, because we're all pioneering this right now together.
I think the psychological safety and trust is really important. And sometimes I've noticed that, it could be tempting to say, oh, I created this all by myself, or I figured this out all by myself. And I think that there is a certain amount of vulnerability to say, hey, I got help with this from AI, but it also lets people know, okay, she's using this to her advantage, but this might not be really her. So I do think that there are a lot of things about being transparent that can allow people to say, oh, when you use that, it missed the mark on this, instead of just thinking, oh, she doesn't get me or what have you. So I think declaring it and being clear about how you use it and really thinking, how are we going to maintain the most psychologically safe and trusting environment as we navigate this territory is really powerful. I saw some nodding happening in the jazz and CT realm. What would you guys like to pepper into this?
I've just added the chart that I mentioned, by the way, into the chat area.
Oh, awesome.
So people are welcome to see that whole traffic light scheme across things like rapport and change and development aspects of coaching, including the risk levels of the EU AI as well. So it's become quite a comprehensive chart people stick up on their walls as a guide to knowing what's safe and what isn't, and where we need to moderate things. So hopefully that'll help people work with those things in a pragmatic way.
I'm very excited about that. Thank you so much. Is it okay if we share it broadly?
Yeah, absolutely. It's public. It's been on LinkedIn all over the place, so it's fine to share.
All right, we will send it out like confetti or what have you. Well, we are continuing on. I think we could have a long conversation, and this is a taste to get people talking and spread the conversation. So thanks for giving people a tool to do that. I would love for you guys to think a little, and girls, to think about, I'm from the north, so I do say that vernacular sometimes, north of the US. So I'd love for you to think about getting out your crystal ball. Anybody have a crystal ball? Can you tell the future?
I wish.
Okay, Jazz has one. Great. Mine broke during COVID. So we'll go with Becky first. Hers looks like, okay, then we'll go to Jazz and then UCT. But get out your crystal ball and just be thinking about, as AI continues to shape coaching, to shape how leaders develop talent, to shape how we engage in organizations. What do you think those skills are that both coaches and leaders and just humans in general should develop? I mean, CT, you even said tech skills were diminishing in importance because of this. So what is important as we begin to do this dance with AI and be the most effective humans and societies we can be? Becky, you want to start us out?
I mean, I think the first piece we can't lose focus enough, but what you put in is what you get out. So certainly making sure that you have really strong prompt engineering skills, though AI will continue to support us on that. I think understanding the components of the problem you're trying to solve in order to get those right insights and help add will be super important into the future. But then the piece about how do you really bring that human intelligence in will continue to be a skill that will be incredibly important. And that's where things like empathy, judgment, emotional intelligence will continue to be and actually become more important in the future, because to Jazz's earlier point, like a personalized experience doesn't mean you feel personally connected. And that is what's going to become important. People will expect a very quick personal experience, personal relationship as the result of technology being able to really address some of the fundamental pieces. So I see those things of really being able to build effective relationships, really apply judgment and knowledge, because you will have all of this data to decipher and understand what does matter, what doesn't matter for the individuals that are sitting in front of you and their organizations and their stakeholders.
Yeah, I mean, that ability to use discretion and judgment and really tap into the things that, make us human beings so that we can connect, not even maybe on a cognitive level, because I feel like AI is a very, hits you in the cognitive part of your body. But what about when it comes to a human to human kind of heart connection? I don't know. Jazz, what are your thoughts on this?
One of my biggest concerns recently is people who produce AI coach bots or AI-based services for coaching. A flag they'll wave is, oh, we've embodied competencies from one of the governing bodies like the ICF or codes of ethics, things like this. But what many people don't realize is those codes of ethics, those competencies, they were designed for human to human exchanges. They were never designed for human to AI exchanges, which is a completely different beast altogether. And I think it's a danger and a risk and a liability. And if we want to go into the future in a way that cultivates that innovation without, the issues to do with risk and safety and security, we need to look at maybe not just even competencies or codes of ethics. We need to go back to the roots and maybe even look at whole new psychologies that we need to understand in order to understand our relationships with AIs as opposed to just human beings. It's a completely different dynamic. It's based on a completely different science than human being psychology and neuroscience. So these are factors that we've got to consider, but there's wider things to consider too. We have to think about democratization of coaching and how AI might facilitate that. And if it's got bias issues, are we going to see increased bias issues in coaching as a consequence? The other thing is, if we correct that by ensuring there's a sufficient diversity of models that drive AIs and also coaching, and not just Western psychological models, like all the courses I've ever seen on coaching, they just use Western psychological models, mostly written by men. Okay, so that's a major concern. There needs to be diversification. And the last thing is, we don't want to answer to some central technology company somewhere. We ideally want to see a decentralization of how AI is used, even coaching. Should we be answering to centralized governing bodies, or do we need something that's more locally sensitive? So those three things, we're going to have to build competencies, practices, technologies all around those things if we want a future for coaching which is genuinely empowering and is not putting people at risk.
I think that's beautifully said. And it makes me think, not only do we have to be very quick in our keeping up of ethics evolution and thinking about things constantly. I mean, I remember when I first became a coach, the last time that they had updated the ethics was a little while ago, then they updated them, and now they're getting faster and faster, but it has to be happening, almost in real time, to be thinking alongside these developments so that we can...
There's one thing to consider, which is people who produce software, especially AI, they update their software through patches and what's called agile weekly cycles, right? Now, if they're being updated on a weekly basis and the governing bodies are only meeting once a year to discuss how to update their code of ethics, I think the code of ethics for the ICF hasn't been revised for several years, it's just been revised. That rate of monitoring and moderation and change is not sufficient for how much AI is going to transform coaching over the next few years.
Yeah. How do we become more agile and adaptive in our tracking, just similarly to how AI developers have begun to do their work or have been doing their work a while. And there is someone who works in that space a lot. CT, I would love for you to expound on this topic. What do we need to think about? What are the skills for the future and what's important these days?
Yeah, I just want to quickly riff on what Jazz was saying. I think that's absolutely true. The pace at which ethics and codes need to be updated are almost going to be real time, and you have to almost time it like sprints. But at the same time, like the irony of it is the only way you could do it that quickly is to learn how to use AI well to support the thinking behind that, which is it's so meta, it's blowing my mind. But when it comes to coaching and leadership, I think there are three things that are evergreen and would never go away. And this was true when I have to think about dealing with like working with my team and helping them grow throughout all the years. It's really just three things, right? Number one, asking good questions. Like this is true for working with humans, working with AI, whatever it is. Like, if you're not asking good questions, you're just gonna get garbage answers. That's always going to be true, like asking good questions. Number two is being able to observe and pay attention to the right things, because things happen. Like there are just a lot of things that happen, and our attention is like this laser beam that just focus on what we want it to focus on. So we need to pay attention to the right things, especially as leaders, as coaches. There are 1,001 data points that you could crunch, and you could theoretically chuck it all into AI, and you will hit some limit somewhere, but theoretically you could chuck everything into AI. But AI doesn't have the necessary focus that you're gonna have, and so you need to train your focus, and that's true even from, like, especially for me, like, train your focus on what matters the most to you, and only humans can answer that question. Like, what matters the most to my team, to my client, to me. AI is not going to be able to give you that answer. So being able to observe and pay attention to the right things. And the third one is, I think as Becky said, like, to be able to exercise judgment. Like, it's and this came up in ironically one of the coaching sessions that I had when I was coaching a leader of a big bank out in Asia back in the day. And one of the things that he was so he wanted to drive really hard in the bank was to have every leader exercise judgment in a responsible way, and not to devolve it, kick it up the can, this, I'm just going to show this to my boss and let my boss decide. Like, exercise judgment and practice exercising judgment. You're going to get it wrong sometimes, but as a leader, as a coach, we have to put ourselves out there. And so those three things: asking good questions, observing and paying attention to the right things, and being sure that we practice exercising judgment. I would say those are the three skills that would never go away.
CT, I love how you bucketed that into three things that are easy for this human brain to understand. And they really connect closely to some of the things that you and Becky and Jazz have also said. In order to observe and pay attention to the right things, I think we need to have this evolving AI ethics in place, in sync with the development. So how can we pay attention to the right things if we don't even know what's happening? So I think that's a really important one. And Becky, back to your answer about what do people really need as leaders, you're right. I think exercising judgment and making an intentional practice around touching into the empathy, the power skills. You call them soft skills. I call them power skills, but really those personal connections. That's where leadership is going to continue to always be important. And Jazz, I feel like your work in this is so evolved compared to mine. I have I'm a big learner here, but really being able to have folks thinking about how do we really think about what ethics looks like as we go through this and do it more real time and with democratization instead of managing it quite so centrally and over longer periods in between is really, really powerful. So I want to thank you three for being here and being generous and being brave. We're going to ask our participants to share any questions that they have out there. You can raise your hand or you can put them in the chat. I know that Kelsey is monitoring for all of those things. Kelsey, do you have anything that you want to come off mute and say on behalf of someone, or let me know if hands are raised anywhere?
We do not have any questions yet in the chat. We have some backups, but we'd really love to hear from you. I don't see any hands raised, but you can also put your questions directly into the chat to everyone or to host and panelist.
One thing that I did not get to ask you, I'll ask until we have another question, is, Jazz, would you mind kind of expounding on Industry 5.0 or the fifth Industrial Revolution and Coaching 5.0? Would you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so it's came up, I think, 2015. It was very much focused on cultivating a wasteless world where we're not, creating so much waste in the world. But then around the time of the pandemic, it became more focused on the recognition that human beings were suffering and there was a loss of connection between people. And how do we recover that? And that meant that the World Economic Forum, EU, and quite a few other organizations said, we need to restore human flourishing. And human flourishing is about health and well-being. It's certainly about people having a sense of purpose and also feeling that they belong somewhere. There's a connection is really important. But technology at the time was not enough, like through Zoom calls and things, to keep that connection sustained in a healthy way, that people felt like they were connected. So there was an increasing need to ensure that technology served connection and in a way that helped people feel like they belonged. And that's really what it centers on. But Coaching 5.0 says, look, the connection is lost typically when people are not exchanging things. And those things that they're exchanging could just be what they've done during their day. But typically for industry and for business, what needs to be exchanged are things like transferable skills, transferable knowledge, these kind of things. And not just for people, but also for things like AI. AIs have to transfer knowledge. They have to transfer data, information between themselves, right? But the biggest challenge is, how do you transfer things between human beings and the AI? How do you generate transferables, as I call them, between human beings and AI? And that's where coaching comes in. That interface, that intersection between people's behaviors and what they've got to transfer between them, and what technologies can do and what they transfer, that interface, that's where Coaching 5.0 really can come into its own. It can help take assets from human beings, their behaviors, their intelligence, their knowledge, and transfer it over to technology. And then technology can do the reverse. It can refine stuff and give it back to the human beings, and it could advance their empathy. It could advance, their knowledge, certainly, and their innovation. But if you do that in a virtuous circle, a virtuous cycle kind of way, you're going to get both advance. And like I said earlier, if it's done right and sustained, you're going to get advancing of humanity itself. And that's really the kind of key hopeful outcome of Industry 5.0, that the flourishing that's done in a way that's sustainable, doesn't damage the environment, takes full advantage of technology. It will lead to an elevation in humanity and how advanced and sophisticated it is, not just from a technical perspective, but also from a place of compassion, a place of caring, and those kind of basic human traits.
I love that. I think what you just said really reminds me of, both CT, you and Becky have both brought up things that are about really advancing human flourishing. Becky, you said something about, hey, AI can give you a bridge to create more space to do what brings you fulfillment. And that's part of flourishing as a human. CT, you talked about your experience with your daughter and that tunnel project that you outsourced to AI. And you're like, okay, that could diminish human flourishing if we followed AI blindly in that case. I would love to hear your thoughts on what you just heard from Jazz. Any reflections? Like, I just had those little aha moments. Becky, you want to go first?
Sure. The piece that stands out to me is, and it's kind of adjusting off of what Jazz said, but as we think about how this technology comes forward, is how are we staying close enough to it to make sure that it's not having impacts that we don't want to see, especially as we're trying to become more human. But when we think about people having access to things like technology to access AI, internet, how do we make sure that that becomes something that is accessible and doesn't start to create these gaps where people won't be able to catch up eventually in the future? And then also thinking back to, when scoring of applications became a thing, we saw a lot of negative impacts afterwards in not recognizing fast enough the judgment that went into that and how there were disparaging impacts to certain groups of people. So I think as this technology is upon us and we're pioneering it, it's really being thoughtful of, where are there gaps that maybe people aren't going to be able to join the journey, or how do we make sure that we're just staying really mindful and close to understand there will be impacts we can't see that are happening right now, and making sure that we're taking the time to ethically address those and reflect and adjust appropriately.
Thank you. UT?
Yeah, one of the things that stood out in what Jazz was sharing, like, I love the term flourishing, because I think that's absolutely what we are striving for as a society and as a citizen of the world. And I really resonated with that iterative process, because if we hold human flourishing as the goal, and we look at technology as an enabler to human flourishing, not the driver of human flourishing. And then we don't think about AI and technology as an end in itself. It's something that supports a greater end, a greater goal that we have. And as somebody who builds tech products, I can say that tech products are enormously influenced by how the user works and thinks and feels, and you have to build that user empathy to be able to build a product that succeeds, and supports existing human workflows, existing human processes. But at the same time, humans are also impacted by technology. Our behavior, our thoughts, our feelings are influenced by technology. So being aware of this iterative cycle and being careful that it doesn't spiral out of control, and instead you create a virtuous cycle of positive interactions between humans and technology. I think that's the key. I don't have the answer for how to do that, but panels just like this, where we raise awareness of this, and to various different people that work either in technology or outside, and just talk to your friendly neighborhood tech founder and just tell them, hey, remember the humans. Remember the humans.
Yeah, remember the humans. I love it. Thank you, CT. Okay, last question of our panel here in 30 seconds or less. We're going to take it from big heady stuff to really practical. What advice would you give to a coach or a leader who is intimidated by integrating AI into their practice today? Is there any baby step they could take? 30 seconds or less for each of you. I'm going to go Jazz, Becky, CT.
Well, basic steps are, even if you don't take AI on, you need to have awareness of it. And secondly, if it starts to affect what you do, then you need to adapt to it, even if you still don't take on AI. But then that might lead you to see where you might be able to augment what you do with AI, and then maybe go from informal use of AI to formal use of AI, which is actually adopting it and integrating it. And if it goes really well, then you may even automate some tasks, But what you shouldn't do is the reverse. Don't automate stuff, integrate and augment things, and then hope that people are going to adapt and shift their awareness. That way never works. It always ends up being a disaster.
Awesome. So first, we're not going to be ostriches. We're not going to put our head in the sand. We're going to start watching. Then we might dip our toe in. Becky?
I would say start testing with yourself. Use it for things in your everyday life. Start using it to reflect on conversations you've had and maybe didn't feel like you got the outcome. So using it for yourself first to gain comfort and start to see what it can do. And then I think that will start to plant some seeds that will quickly flourish and grow for you.
Some small experiments for yourself. Love it. CT.
So this is something that you can literally do right after this call. Like, you just go into ChatGPT or your favorite AI model and type in, I'm a coach beginning to try to understand how to use AI. And I want to implement this in my practice or in my coaching business. What do you need to know from me to be able to help me? Just ask me questions as if in an interview. And whatever AI would do, just ask you questions, you just respond and see what you like, and keep what you like. Tell it that I like these recommendations, I don't like these. Tell me, expand on these, right? And just keep guiding the AI to help you. Like, you can do this like literally in 15 minutes and you'll change your business.
Beautiful. I love that very practical next step. I'm hoping everyone's going to go out and give that a go. Give it a try in your next AI platform. Thank you, Jazz. Thank you, CT. Thank you, Becky. Thank you, Kelsey and Shannon, who have been amazing producers. And thank you very much to ICF Virginia for hosting this session. Wishing you guys all the best and a whole lot of judgment, empathy, and goodness.
Thanks all.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
So nice to meet you
Bye.
guys. Bye-bye.